Hello, hello, hello. This is the Fat Panda, and I have our second preseason power rankings for the WPF Season 8. This time I will be going over the lucky 16 coaches in the Magikarp League and letting you know what I think about their teams that they have just finished drafting. I do know that some battles have already taken place. I have not taken anything that has happened in battle into account for these power rankings. This is simply a list of how I feel about the teams right now. I don't even really... I think I know who won, maybe one of them, but other than that, that's all I know. Give you guys the exact same disclaimer that I ended up giving in my first video for Gyarados League. I'm definitely not going to like some of your teams. I honestly probably couldn't even tell you who half the coaches are for the various teams here. I'd have to look at my notes because so many new teams and new coaches that even if I don't like your team, you know that doesn't mean I don't like you, because chances are I don't know which team goes with what coach right now, outside of a few names that I recognize. But don't worry, even though I know who you guys are, I don't not like you. I don't like you. I don't not like you. I don't not like you. Got it? And that's kind of the thing where you know that I am not going to bother taking the time to edit this video, because I am too damn lazy. I don't remember if there were any other disclaimers. That's probably the only one that matters, and you probably don't really fucking care in the first place. So I should probably just move on, I guess, right? And get you guys the nice meat and potatoes of what coaches are where. In that case, I guess I should start with my number one team that I have in Magikarp League right now, the Bronx Blastoise. I am a huge fan of this team. I'm not a huge fan of Zamazenta Crowned. I was one of the proponents to get it dropped from the ban list this season as a test subject, along with, of course, Speed Boost, Blaziken, and whatnot. But however, I think it requires a ton of team support to ever even be remotely successful, and knowing exactly basically what the person is going to have to draft does put them at a disadvantage. But I do, for the most part, really like what the Bronx... I probably said Bronx Blastoise. You can tell I've been watching way too much Pokegame Draft League videos over the years. This is the Bronx Blastoise. If that's what I said the first time, then pretend you haven't heard the past 15 seconds. It's been a long day. But I really like what the Bronx Blastoise are indeed doing with their team, for the most part. And even in the first little pro spot that I put there, team support, this team is way more than the sum of its parts, which is something you don't always see when you are dealing with these kind of draft teams. Oftentimes there may be superstars that outshadow the rest of the team, but basically everything on this team really kind of helps itself, and as well as helping the rest of the team, which I really like. Zamazenta Crown really likes Slowbro being there. It really likes Flareon. Really likes Hydreigon. Okay, it's not a huge fan of having Hydreigon there. It's like fighting and stuff, but everything just kind of fits. You know, Slowbro, Tangela, Flareon are really weird but kind of good core. Tangela is probably one of the better tier 5s. It always seems to have a place on the map, and in it like 3 or 4 easy matches, which if you can get a tier 5 to 4 matches and it does well in all of them, that's absolutely a good start to a season. This is basically the definition of a team that is looking to grind your opponent down. There aren't really any true superstars for like the setup and wipe the opposing team from the map. You know, I mean, Deontay has Calm Mind. Superior boosts itself as it attacks. Silvally has Swords Dance. Hydreigon has Nasty Plot. Like, there are some options, but they're not all, like, you know, it's no, those aren't, rarely are those options going to be, like, a consistent one-turn wonder type of deal. They're all good, of course, in their own varying situations, but they're not something you can, like, think you're going to rely on week after week. And that is really where this team does have a problem, is its immediate power. There's some high stats here. Like, Zamazenta has a really high attack stat. Silvally has, of course, the 120 base power multi-attacks. Hydreigon has extra Draco Meteor. But overall, the options of how to hit hard and fast don't exist on this team. It's going to require grinding them out through these kind of bulky offensive mons, which, you know, if you come up against, for example, there is a team in this league that drafted several Regenerator mons. This team would be a team that might have trouble against something like that, because they're going to be able to heal kind of at the same pace you do damage, and while being able to chunk you down a little bit. So having something that can just break through an opponent out of nowhere is really important, and this team is kind of lacking in that. The other thing I don't like about this team, I actually don't like Superior. Even in Tier 3 now, because it lost Hidden Power, I think Superior is just absolute garbage. It's not even necessary to complete your Firewater Grass core if that's something you care about, because Tangela is here, and Tangela is surprisingly able to come to a lot of matches. I think Superior could be a lot of different things. I don't know what Tier 3s are left, but there's definitely some things this team is missing. It's missing a good Ghost. That would certainly help it a lot. It could also use, I don't know, actually not really much else. Maybe an offensive fire type, but I don't know if there's anything even like that in Tier 3 right now. As soon as Salazzle was drafted, I don't remember. You know, something like that. But I just don't think Superior is going to really offer much here. It's like, it's got Defog, but this team, I guess it doesn't mind having another Defogger, but if you're defogging a Superior, you're doing all sorts of weird things. You know, Leaf Storm Contrary is good, but so many things Wall Grass, and its only coverage now is like Dragon Pulse, which is pretty weak and pretty bad. So there's just, so you're like relying on like Glare or Subsea. Like, it just gets, it's so meh. I think it could and should be dropped for something that is better. That's really the only real critique, though, I have of this team for the most part. Especially, like, if you can drop that and get something that breaks and fills another need, that's amazing. That would just be far and away the best thing we could see. But easily, this is my favorite team of the season in Magikarp League, and I expect it to do great things. And if there's going to be a team, I think, that gets calls for Zamazenta to be rebanned between the two leagues, I think that this is going to be it. At number 2, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning with a absolutely terrifying team. I don't know what it is with my favorite teams in the league right now, but all of them seem to draft completely unnecessary grass types. So they're basically rocking 10-mon teams, in my opinion. But everything else on the Tampa Bay Lightning is absolutely amazing. Speed tiers run the absolute gamut. I mean, 20 all the way up to 130 with very few gaps in between. The 100, or the 100, the 110 of Gallade to 124 of Rabambi is like the biggest thing, but I mean, like, who cares? You know, that's not exactly an important gap for the most part. I mean, it is a very important gap, but if that's like your worst and you've got two things at the 124 or higher, it's hardly worth thinking about. And Crobat and Rabambi are there to give a little bit of extra oomph to the speed. Other than that, I mean, this team has just about everything it needs utility-wise. It's missing Toxic Spikes, but it's got all the other hazards. It's got great options for hazard control. It's got all the clerical options you could ever need. It's got, you know, it's got good defensive mons. It's got great offensive mons. I mean, Gallade Mega is great offensively. Tapu Fini and Crocodile can run great offensive sets. He's got actually quite hidden sand offense core in there as well with Gigalith and Dracozolt. One of those things where if you're not really on top of your prep, that is an easy thing to miss. because, I mean, Dracozolt Sandrush is new, of course. Well, not new, but new-ish. And it's just, everything there is, like, great. Once again, like, it's hard to find something on this team I don't like, but, you know, if there really is one obvious thing, I still think Thwackey is just a terrible pick. I really don't get it on this team, though, because this team really likes Tapu Fini's Misty Terrain. Gallade, Crook, Pharaoh, Dracozolt, Gigalith to a point, none of them want to get burned or toxic or anything like that. And Thwackey being able to come in and screw up any potential Misty Terrain is just weird. It's not even like he drafted it for having to have a grass type, because Ferrothorn is there. Priority-wise, I guess he doesn't have good priority. He's got, like, Sucker Punch Druddigan, but he's got 2 really fast mons and Sandrush, and he's got Shadow Sneak on Gallade as well. Like, I really do not understand the point of Thwackey on this team whatsoever. It could be turned into probably almost any tier 5 that's left, and still be better than Thwackey currently is for that team. But everything else in this team is absolutely fantastic. At number 3, we have the Lake Erie Monsters with a terrifying top-end first 4 picks or so. Kind of like a couple teams in our league, if you just looked at the first 4 picks or so, you would say there's no way there's a team that is better in this, like going to be better than this team. Zapdos Galar is just, it's a surprisingly really, really good offensive mod now. It's between Defiant, Flying Fighting Stab is great. It partners really well with Garchomp as like a double physically offensive, just powerhouse. One hits, well, they both hit really hard, but they both kind of perform different roles while hitting. Arcanine, Clefable are great defensive options, as well as quite good and possibly surprising offensive options as well. So those 4, like the high tier picks spent on this team, along with, if you look below, like Regirockets, all just absolutely amazing options for being able to power through opponents. It's just, you know, it's basically impossible for someone to look at this team and say, I can stop all of that, or even nearly all that. Like, ignore mons that don't matter, like Sceptile or Venomoth for the most part, and just look at the rest, and it's still like, how do I stop Regirockets, Zapdos? How do I stop, you know, how do I stop those, plus Shell Smash Blastoise, plus Scale Shot Garchomp, plus Calm Mind Clef, or like whatever. This team can kill anything and everything. This team can easily defeat any team, even the ones above it, with just the right prep. And that's where this team is really going to need to get it right, because, or like, people are going to need to get it right against this team, because it can only bring 6, which is important. If you can get the 6 right, you're in a better spot. Things I don't necessarily like about this team: I don't like the lack of hazard variety. That is absolutely true. He's got a few Stealth Rockers. I mean, all 3 Stealth Rockers are good at it, so that's fine. Garchomp, Clef, and Steelix all can easily have Stealth Rocks on their movesets with little difficulty. But that's it. No other hazards. I don't know what it is about the coaches in both Magikarp and Gyarados League this season, but they do not care about spikes. No one's drafting spikes. There are 6 coaches in Magikarp that drafted any spikers at all. Toxic Spike's more common, but once again, not on this team, and this team doesn't have webs. This team would actually kind of like webs. I mean, obviously, you look at, like, Regirock can go and Unburden, although he doesn't have terrain, so Unburden Sceptile's kind of like, meh. But this team would actually really appreciate webs. Blastoise could then beat any Scarfers. Zapdos absolutely loves the opponent or having webs on its team, because it just begs for Defogs to activate its Defiant. Garchomp, Arcanine, Venomoth, Glalie, they're all like in a speed that kind of goes, well, if my opponent was a little slower, that'd be great. So it could get something like that. So I think that would have been a really good option for Lake Erie to try and get. Maybe it was impossible, you know, to get anything that wasn't garbage, but I mean, even just looking at this team, I don't know. I'm sure there's a way to do it. Heck, He's got 2 tier 4s, and I don't think Sceptile does anything for this team. He can probably find a grass type Sticky Webber in tier 5 and shave 20 points off, which don't matter. Get like Leave Annie or something. I don't know. I think this team would like webs. I think this team would like more than just rocks at the very least. Other thing I don't like about this is I really do think that the lower tier picks this team has are quite bad. I don't see the point of Sceptile. It's possible he's in a division that has several terrains, but even then, I think Sceptile is a terrible abuser of Unburden. I don't think it's a good grass type. I think it's even in tier 4 for I don't even know what reason it's in tier 4. It's just terrible. I think it's actually worse than several tier 5s that are available probably. But Steelix, if Steelix is your steel type, you'll have a problem because Steelix is not good. It cannot come to every match. Now, of course, you don't have to bring a steel type to every match, but any match you have a steel is generally going to be better than a match you don't. And I think there's too much overlap with Steelix and like Garchomp or, just the Scalds that are going to get thrown at this team. It doesn't even pair. It doesn't pair well with most things. Like it pairs well with Clef, but it doesn't pair well with the other things on its team. I'm quite more down on Steelix than most people are, I know, but I do not like it. Venomoth hasn't been good since Generation 7. The moment Z-moves disappeared, Venomoth just became average. Like, it's nice that it can run a lot more utility options than like Butterfree, for example. Since it has Tinted Lens, it generally only needs like Bug Buzz. You can run Sludge Bomb or something if you want, but you can also then run like Subs, Sleep Powder, Covert Dance. Like you get those little options, but it just doesn't offer enough. It does have Toxic Spikes now, which is quite cool, and that is an interesting option. But like Venomoth is quite bad. There's better tier 4s, that I don't like. It doesn't. Like, he's got a grounded poison already, so that wasn't a reason to pick it up. There's gotta be better setup sweepers that are left in tier 4 than Venomoth. It just doesn't really offer a lot. If I was this coach, I would probably look and try and spend the few trades I have this season improving those bottom picks. Because God knows the top half of his draft is all very, very good. And will drag him to the playoffs, but having better low tier mons are what get you from getting to the playoffs to getting to the finals, and that's really what the coaches are looking for, especially the coaches with the best teams, which of course the Lake Erie Monsters certainly are. Speaking of really good teams, I think it's time we actually move on to number 4. I have the Route to Rattata with a surprisingly hyper offensive team. Of course, there were a little bit more bulky and supporty options chosen in the last few rounds. But if you look at the start of this team, the first like 6 or 7 picks, all this team does is, it's a much more suicidal team than what you're used to running in draft. And that is both good and bad. It's something that teams are rarely prepared for, but it's easier to prep for if you know it almost has to come. Now, thankfully, the Route to Rattata did draft some excellent utility and more bulk options with the last few picks, getting Claydol and Umbreon to kind of pair with the bulk they might get from like Mew and Primarina and potentially Vikavolt. So, the options to run a more bulky, balanced or bulky offense team now does exist. As opposed to the pure suicidal screens plus, or like Suicide Mew plus screens, Ninetales, or whatever options that existed before. And with those last few picks, they really did manage to get their utility options up. This team has access to every hazard, which is amazing. They've got, I guess not good hazard control, but they've got a decent amount. They've got like 4 mons that can get rid of hazards, so that works out pretty well in case they do find themselves in a more prolonged match. With the drafting of Umbreon, they've got some clerical options as well. So this team does have a decent amount of potential to go deep into a match. It's not as suicidal as it looks at first glance. Downsides of this team, the cores are very weak. Didn't draft a fire type, didn't draft a grass type. There's no dragon on the team. There's no ghost on the team. There's a lot of like overlap that goes on here. There's 2 grounds, there's 2 psychics, there's 2 flying types that attack basically the exact same way. The special offensive, that's like the specially offensive mons that you're going to rely on week in and week out, have very similar speed tiers, with Nido King at 85, and Preman is like 60 or 65, so they outspeed a lot of the same things. Vicavolt's a little slower, but Jolteon is not something you can rely on week in and week out simply because you've got a better electric already. So, you know, unless you absolutely need that 130 speed, you're generally going to run Vicavolt instead. Regardless, there's a lot of problems with cores here. A couple of trades to maybe soothe that out and remove a little bit of this option overlap is absolutely something I would recommend the coach of the Route to Rattata take care of in the first couple of weeks before people start looking really into trades and taking the options he's looking for away. Evidently I've got my numbers mixed up, but at number 5, even though it says number 6, I have the Bay Packecleons. This is a really good offensive team. There is every option you need. Zero Aura, Mawile, Mega, Infernape. Tornadus gets Nasty Plot now, so even the base version is like super offensively inclined if it wants to be. Swellow has Boom Burst. Haxorus is always a massive threat. There's a lot of really, really good offense on this team. On top of that, there is also just the speed tiers disgust me. It's probably the best we've got of all 16 teams here. I mean, there's hardly a gap anywhere on the team except like from the 74, which I think is Seismitoad, to 97, which is Haxorus, which is, you know, a gap of 23 is a decent gap, but it's that gap where like it's the gap where the offensive mods really start to take shape, and you know, even that gap, like Seismitoad can run a little bit of speed or so on and so forth. So it's not really as big of a problem as you're going to think. Yeah, this team is going to be able to hit you quite hard almost every which way. If there was one thing I don't necessarily think it's amazing at, special attacking, it's a little bit wonky because like Zero Aura and Infernape are both things that can hit either way, but I believe both are technically better physically. Of course, you'd lose Zero Aura's signature Plasma Fist, and Infernape really likes having close combat. So, you know, they prefer to run physically if possible, so like especially you're going to be relying on things like Life Orb, Magikarp, Sigilif, or Nestipla Tornadus, or Spec Swallow, or something like that. And they all happen to be flying types, which I just noticed. So that's unfortunate. Also, a lot of flying. Oh, I guess he's got 2 electric immunities. I forget Zero Aura has Volt Absorb now, so well, it's always had it, but it has it. So 2 immunities, which is great. The one thing I'm not a huge fan of on this team is that of the 3 real defensive options you've got, Amoonguss, Seismitoad, and Porygon 2, 2 of them are fairly large momentum sinks. Porygon 2 obviously has access to Teleport now, which it will abuse the heck out of this season, I am sure. But Amoonguss and Seismitoad, once they're in. So if your opponent has any good momentum mons, they can pretty easily get that little advantage over on you. But it's not as terrible because, you know, Amoonguss still has like Spore, Stun Spore, so he can punish anything. Amoonguss never dies to any one hit, but you know, once it's status something, it's kind of awkward because then you got to predict a double or use a pretty pathetic attack to maybe hit something coming in or whatnot. So it's not too amazing at that. Seismitoad, of course, is Rocks and Scald and Toxic, but it's pretty easy to predict. Certainly easier to predict than what Amoonguss is going to do, and Porygon 2 can always get out of there scot-free. As far as other things, utility options, this team is lacking a little. There's only 3 rockers, which 2 of are Mawile and Infernape. So the majority of the time this team gets out Stealth Rocks, it's going to be from Seismitoad. And there are no other hazards on the team. So I feel like that's going to almost force Seismitoad to not only come every week, but dedicate its move slot to rocks almost every week. Mawile and Infernape are both, of course, great at getting rocks out, but they hate losing a move slot to do so. So doing that is like just absolutely nothing they're looking forward to. Another problem with this team is there are only 3 hazard removers: Tornadus, Sigilif, and Swallow. None of them ever want to hit Defog. And the worst thing is your most common defogger is probably going to be Tornadus, who has Prankster. So if you run Prankster Defog, if they have a Dark type, they can just prevent you from rocking or getting rid of their hazards at all. Which is a problem that will possibly come up. I've seen it before. And it's something you don't want to think about. This team could really use another way to get rid of hazards that's on something that kind of wants to use that move. Another thing, like this team, I think is a tendency. It's going to get kind of ground down. It doesn't have really any good way to like recover your Mons. There's of course no Wish Passer. There's no Heal Bell. There's no Aromatherapy. I'm fairly sure. I kind of looked through some of the Mons and I didn't see it, and I don't recall anything on this team having a clerical move. So it's one of those where in a longer match, this team might end up having trouble getting ground down. If you're trying to use something like a Tornadus as a defensive pivot, you're going to find that it is certainly nowhere near as bulky as its Therian form, because it doesn't have that regenerator. And that might be something that kind of drags this team down a little bit as the season goes on. At number 6, technically, even though it says number 5, I have the Whitman Whiscash. This team is the recipient of the Blaziken that was dropped. Well, Blaziken was risen in tiers, but Speed Boost, of course, was dropped from Banned to Tier 1. Surprisingly, in Magikarp League, Blaziken didn't go till round 3. I have absolutely no idea what that is about. Yeah, it's unfathomable to me. I can understand maybe not taking Blaziken in like round 1 if you kind of have a plan that you want to run. But if it comes back to you in round 2, you take it. It doesn't matter if your first pick was fucking Bucephalon or, you know, whatever other fire types are in tier 1. Or if you took like Charizard X or something, like you take Blaziken at that point. It's simply the best pick available. So somehow Whitman not only got Blaziken in round 3, but got just disgusting Fire Water Grass Core. I mean, look at that thing. Rillaboom, Vaporeon, Blaziken, or even Rillaboom, Vaporeon, Moltres. Either of those is just absurd. Even ignore the Rillaboom. There's a Vileplume there. Vileplume is also a very good grass type. Down in tier 4. Not as, of course, overwhelming as Rillaboom is, but certainly absolutely serviceable, especially cored up with Vaporeon and Moltres. That is a really good, like, defensive, just backbone. Or even offensive. Moltres can hit pretty dang hard if it really wants to. So there's just, like... I mean, the Fire Water Grass core of this team is absurd, but that's also because it's half the team. So, there's that. Utility-wise, I mean... Whitman has, I believe, literally everything. Yeah, they've got a Spiker. Klefki is an amazing Spiker. They've got Toxic Spikes on Drapion, which it can certainly run whenever it wants to. It's got Webs. Galvantula is fantastic at Webs. It's got its Cleric and Vaporeon. The one downside of the utility is there's one Stealth Rock user. And Stealth Rock user is Nihilego, which doesn't generally like to run Stealth Rock all that much. Actually, Nihilego might have Toxic Spikes too, so he actually has 2 Toxic Spike users. I did not think about that. I'm pretty sure it does. My brain's failing me. Regardless, but yeah, the utility, it's got access. This team has access to everything, and that's important. Even having Nexus to dual screens with Klefki, like just everything is here, which is fantastic. Things I don't like about this team, I mean, the obvious. You look at the speeds of this team. You top out at 108. Nothing higher than 108. There are a lot of 110 or higher drafted in this league. I mean, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 12, 15, 16, 18, 20, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. There are 31 Pokemon that were drafted that are faster than anything that this guy has. And every single team has at least one. Most have two, several have three. So this team is going to have a lot of trouble outspeeding opponents, which this is a problem that I also saw with the team that drafted Mega Blaziken, Jesus Christ, that is never being allowed. That drafted Blaziken in Gyarados League too. Both teams went really slow. It's like they're thinking that Blaziken's going to speed up the whole team. I mean, and I think maybe both got webs, but it's kind of like those are two options you don't want to have to rely on. Get some speed that's not Prankster Klefki. You know, get something that's naturally fast. You don't want to have conditions for outspeeding your opponent all the time. So that is something this team absolutely needs to look into it. Other than that, I mean, you just saw what I was mentioning with the Firewater Grass Core. There's a lot of overlap on this team. There are a lot of types that just why do you have two grass? You got two fire, we got two electric, which is just whack. You got two poison, I mean two fairy. There, okay, never complain about two fairies. This fairy is just disgustingly good. But like there's a lot of overlap here that doesn't have to be here. Things can be sacrificed without I think you can lose good mons that have good cores here and not lose anything. Like Vileplume could go, you wouldn't lose anything. Moltres could go, you wouldn't really lose anything. And you could, infuse some different blood to get this team going on a whole nother level. Would be a really good thing, I think, in the end for this team. At number 7, oh lord, those typos have just absolutely blown my mind. At number 7, we have the ASUmarills with probably nearly the highest value tier 1 picks we've seen in this entire draft, with Dragapult and Tapu Lele, which are just, I mean, my god, they support each other fantastically. They have great offensive coverage, and supported by things like a Magnezone and Mega Sharpedo and Talonflame, are just going to really kind of shred teams apart. And I mean, look at those first 3 picks. That right there, Dragon Fairy Steel. That is called, I know what I want in my core, and I'm going to get it in my first 3 picks. And there is nothing wrong with that. This team is absurd with those high value, high tier picks. I mean, just look at the tier 2s. Like the tier 1s, you have Dragapult, Lele, crazy. Tier 2s, you have Magnezone, Suicune, crazy. Tier 3s, you have Blissey, which is super under-tiered, which was my mistake before the draft started. I didn't even notice. And then Rotom-Mow, which is it's super underappreciated in my opinion, Rotom-Mow is. In tier 4, you've got Talonflame and Rhyperior, which are both very good. Tier 5, I think Sirfetch'd is technically a tier 4 too, but you look at the last couple picks, Sirfetch'd, Rampardos, those are kind of, you can just ignore those picks for now. Both obviously have a place. They are crazy, super offensive. I mean, you can tell with the last few picks, this coach just really wanted a bit more offense, and just was like, you know what, fuck it, Rhyperior, Cranidos, Sirfetch'd, bring on the physical walls, I don't care. And you know what, that's actually probably a pretty good way to look at it, because the top 3 picks, they're basically all special. Dragapult, of course, has Dragon Dance and okay physical moves, but ideally Dragapult, Lele, and Magnezone all really want to run special. So kind of infusing that physical offensive presence was a really good idea, because you don't want Mega Sharpedo and Talonflame to have to carry that entire load. I wish the coach hadn't done it by, getting 3 Mons, 2 of which are rock types, all 3 of which are really slow. But I guess those were the ones she thought was best at the time, so we'll see if all 3 make it through the season or not. I would hope not for her sake, but we will find out. This team also would really like the option to run any hazard that's not Stealth Rock. Once again, that seems to be a common trend in this league. I would recommend every coach even if you don't necessarily care too much about other hazards, at least get one spiker or one toxic spiker. Pick one and find it somewhere, I think is super important. Webs are, of course, always good depending on the team. This team doesn't necessarily look like it really would care all that much about webs, so I think it's certainly leavable. Hazard control, though, is absolutely a problem. Talonflame can get rid of hazards, and Rotom can get rid of hazards. So Rotom's going to be running Defog a lot, which limits its ability to run more interesting sets like Nasty Plot or different support moves. So getting something that can run a little bit more Defog or Rapid Spin somewhere else, I think would certainly be a really good idea. At number 8, we have the Milwaukee Stantler with what looks to be the Mod's Choice Award for coach that, or something, I don't know, coach that seems to be sucking up to the mods most, with both a Mega Gyarados and a Chansey pick. Somebody else took Sceptile, so he wasn't able to get the trifecta, but, you know, found Unburdened Mons in Spirit, so we'll just pretend. This team also has a very, very good spread of speeds. I noticed that the coaches in Magikarp League, for the most part, really managed to spread their teams out speed-wise more than the teams in Gyarados League. There's a lot less coaches with gaps, and when there are gaps, they're usually at the extremes, not in the middle. Maybe missing a 125 or higher, or missing like something under like 40. You know, things that rarely, if ever, are going to come into play. But this is one of the examples of just a really good speed spread. I think, the third best overall, with just a gap of 20, which is, I don't even know where that is, actually. Looking at the thing, there is no 20 gap. Oh, the gap of 20 is between 30 and 50. So yeah, because nothing is under 50. So yeah, realistically, the biggest gap is 18, which is the second best. That's a lot about things that don't matter. This team is really good at spreading out its speed. I think that's very important. I know there were plenty of people that seem to be somewhat skeptical that that was as important, but I do think it is really important to just kind of spread that butter out over the whole bread, as they say, or something. I don't know. The other thing I really like about this team is the setup options on this team are nuts. I mean, Columbine Coco exists, Dragon Dance Mega Gyarados, Swords Dance, Scissor. You've got Unburdened Hitmonlee, you've got Unburdened Hawlucha. Dragon Dance Flygon is there. I'm going to pretend like Flygon doesn't exist. I hate Flygon. Looking at his team, I don't think it should be on the team. Although I have a lot of problems with some of the lower picks. I think there's a lot of overlap, which we'll get to. But the setup options on this team are nuts. And it's going to be extremely difficult for any team in the league to be able to stop all of them. Even if some are similar, like there's 2 Dragon Dance users and there's 2 Unburdened users. They can do it in different ways, or they hit different speeds, stuff like that. It is going to be difficult to be able to prepare for all of them. So, I think that is something this team is indeed going to do very well. With being able to kind of grind down your opponent with like Chansey, Gligar, and hazards and stuff, and then just deliver the finishing blow with like a Swords Dance, Scissor, or whatever any given week. Things I don't like about this team, you can tell just by looking. There is a lot of overlap here. He has 3 ground types, and none of them are really all that different from each other. Sure, they might share different weaknesses and resistances for the most part because of their secondary typings, but all 3 are, like, I don't know, like, Swampert and Gligar are basically the same thing. They're rocks, they're U-turn or flip turn, earthquake, and then like a hazard or like a status or something. Like Defog from Gligar exists as well, but they're very similar. But those aren't even the biggest offenders. I think Flygon is easily, well, okay, of the ground types, I think Flygon is the one that is most likely to need to be kicked to the curb. There has got to be anything better in Tier 3 than Flygon. It is by far one of the least valuable picks you can make in the game, especially in the Tier 3s. It's just so middling at everything it does. It just sucks at all of it. It's a bad Dragon Dancer. It's a bad Defogger. It's a bad Choice Mon. It's a bad Special Mon. It's a bad defensive option. It requires an extremely specific matchup to be useful in any way, and is better off sitting on the bench most of the time. And if it's better on the bench, it's better in free agency. Otherwise, overlap, I mean, there's the obvious. Hitmonlee and Hawlucha are there together. I really do think this is almost like a coach didn't even notice that Hawlucha was either A, available, or B, existed. Saw it at the end of the thing, was like, holy cow, I can fit another tier 1. I'm going to get Lucha with my Coco. And hopefully, after week 1, drops Hitmonlee for a tier 4 that can add something to this team, because there's really very little that Hitmonlee can ever do that Hawlucha couldn't. It would take, once again, a very specific matchup for it to matter, and I think you're more likely to find a matchup that a replacement for Hitmonlee does more for your team than a matchup where Hitmonlee is better than Hawlucha. Other than that, of course, I've been really kind of hitting on it a lot with the coaches in Magikarp League. Hazard variety, just anything other than rocks. Pick one of the 3, and that's good. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 coaches in Magikarp League only got rocks, and most of them barely got rocks. I know everyone's like, oh, about heavy-duty boots and defog is everywhere and stuff, but they don't have to run those if you don't have anything that threatens them. So get your damn hazards in order. Get different types of hazards. Make them think a little. Jeez. What's the point of having a super offensive, like, Hawlucha, Gyarados, Tapu Koko, Scissor Wombo combo if you can't threaten them with hazards and wear them down? Punish them, please. Or you're just punishing me by having to watch games that are longer than they need to be. Number 9, I have the Bolton Boldores with a great first 2 picks, and then a lot of weird stuff. You know, Scissor, or Mega Scissor in this case, Rotom Wash, is a very tried and true kind of, you know, screw with your opponent. They're very good. I know I'm not a huge Rotom Wash fan in the first place, but this combo goes, it's fantastic. I don't think doubling down on your defenses by adding Donphan, which is weak to grass, was a great idea, but I think overall like this top 4 row. It's very bulky balance, but it does work quite well. Then as you go down, there's some good support options and some good offensive options, but overall I do think the offense on this team, like the setup, is just a little too slow, or it's like too samey. You've got slow Mega Scissor with Swords Dance and Bullet Punch. You've got slow Breloom with Swords Dance and Mach Punch. And you've got slow Dragonite with Dragon Dance and Extreme Speed. They all do that. And then, of course, fast Sneasel with Swords Dance and Ice Shard and stuff. But, excuse me, they all do, like, the same damn thing, which is very weird. But when things aren't going well for this team, the good news is they've got fantastic fallback options. There is a wide spread of defensive mons available for this team. Rotom, Donphan, Florges, Cofagrigus are all primarily going to be defensive. Rotom can be offensive with this team, which is really nice. For sure, being able to run Nasty Plot, Rotom Wash. Scissor is, of course, a great defensive option as well at times. Ditto is a very surprisingly good defensive bond, because you can just copy their defense, heal it up, or, you know, use their momentum move to get to something better. People don't use Ditto defensively like that nearly enough, but it is an option. So, and of course, defensive Dragonite is certainly a thing, I guess, now that boots exist. Like, it's better than it was, I guess. It's weird, and I wouldn't recommend it more than once probably in a season, but it's possible. I certainly actually wouldn't recommend. Actually, I wouldn't even recommend it on this team ever, because this team isn't offensive enough, like, off the rip. But yeah, once again, like I said, pros, this team has a lot of setup. This Rotom can actually afford to run Nasty Plot. A lot of times you'll see teams that drafts that Rotom isn't able to, but this one can. And of course, you've got Curse or Sword Stance Scissor. You've got Calm Mind Florges exists. You've got Ditto to take advantage of their setup. You got Sword Stance Breloom. You got Nasty Plot Azelf. You got Dragon Dance Dragonite. You've got, I guess, Calm Mind. I forgot. Yeah, you can have Calm Mind Cofagrigus too, you know, like, or Nasty Plot Trick Room or something weird like that. But it's generally not that good at that. And of course, then Sword Stance Sneasel. So like, there are setup options all over this team. It's hard to prepare for all of them, which is certainly a good thing for the Bolton Boldores. Yeah, but once again, I'm going to harp on it a lot. Hazards. I know no one takes hazards as seriously as I do. It is quite obvious. But deployment for this team for hazards isn't great. Got 2 rockers on this team. Donphan loves clicking stealth rocks. Azelf, not as much. It likes to have coverage moves, unless it's like a suicide lead. But this team does not look like a team that wants suicide lead Azelf, barely ever. The plus side, this team did get a second hazard. It found Toxic Spikes on Cofagrigus, which is fantastic. I love Toxic Spikes on that dude. It's great. It's able to gain you something out of a turn with something that normally can't go anywhere and can only like throw off like a Will-O-Wisp or something. Be able to drop a Toxic Spike really does actually kind of keep the momentum up a little bit, which is very nice. Otherwise, this team actually has really good utility. It's got half the team can defog or remove hazards in some way. A couple heal bellers. There's of course Florges for wishing as well, and then 5 mons at least on this team have priority. Bullet Punch, Ice Shard, Mach Punch, E-Speed, Ice Shard. Yes, 5 right there, and of course Ditto kind of counts because it's often scarfed and of course will be faster than whatever it copies. So all sorts of great options here. This team can, if it can find like its win condition every week, will cause trouble all season long for anyone who faces it. At number 10, I have the Detroit Drills with Regenerator the team. I don't know if 3 is the record for number of regen mons drafted in a season before, but it's got to be either tied for first or second by someone might have drafted 4 at one point. It certainly isn't common, and Regenerator is probably the most broken ability that's commonly available. I think now, because the train abilities were all nerfed. Oh, yeah, adaptabilities, but it's not common. So yeah, I mean, Regenerator, it's easily one of the top abilities in the game, and those first 3 picks with the ability to just kind of wall all the things were really nice. This team then decided to go even further and kept drafting defensive mons like Hippowdon, Alcremie's defensive, Articuno's defensive, Dragalge's off and off defensive, Metagross can be defensive, Manectrica's intimidates. Like, this team is dedicated to making opponents do less damage and hopefully grinding them out that way. That is really where this team kind of excels. The problem this team has is there is a huge speed gap for this team between the defensive and the offensive options. It goes from 85, which I believe, I don't even know what 85 is. Oh, it's Articuno. And 70 is, like, it goes from 70 Metagross, 85 Articuno, all the way up to 119, which is Cinderace. That is a gap of 34, which is the entire span of offense on teams. This team is going to be dealing with Adamant or Modest all season long. It's also going to be dealing with mons that are a lot fatter than you think, which does spell trouble for defensive-minded teams because they're just simply harder to wear down. Now you'd be like, well, that's fine. You don't wear them down on damage numbers. You wear them down on damage percentages because you're going to be using hazards. Except this team doesn't. This team has 2 rockers. Hippowdon loves clicking Stealth Rock, although Hippowdon can't even run Sandstream on this team for additional chip, which kind of negates the whole point because there is 1 immunity to sand on the entire team. That's Metagross. Well, of course, Hippowdon is immune itself, but nothing else is immune. You can't run sand on this team. Like, obviously you wouldn't necessarily anyway because you don't have an abuser, but like why would you draft a Powdon if you aren't going to run Sands? If you cannot run Sandstream, you can't run it. It actively hurts him. It's a negative ability. Very weird. But yeah, Stealth Rockers. Powdon can run Stealth Rocks and Metagross can run Stealth Rocks. That's it. Also, one Toxic Spike user, of course, in Dragalge, but no spikes. That's a really rough number of hazards for a team that is going to have trouble killing things outright normally. Offensive options, of course, are fairly limited. You've got Tornadus can run fairly offensive if wants, and of course Cinderace Manectric, that's going to be the bulk of his offense. And then, of course, Dragalge and Metagross are down there with like the bulky offensive stereotype, but Lord knows if they're even going to be able to do it either. But do that week in, week out. Metagross has relatively bad setup options. Mostly, I think it's just got agility. I don't think it has Home Claws or anything. So it's going to rely on like weakness policy to hurt things, or banned, but banded Steel Psychic Stab is just kind of whack. Dragalge blows things apart, of course, because of adaptability. But once again, Poison Dragon is followed by, well, Steel, which is very rough. And Dragalge doesn't have a way to hurt Steel types at all. So, in fact, I'm pretty sure Draco Meteor is its best way to hurt Steel types. So for a team that seems to be wanting to tank hits and grind people down, it doesn't really seem to have a way to actually do the grinding itself, which is a big problem. The other thing I don't like about this team is I don't really know how it punishes setup. For example, if I look at this team, what in Lore's name is stopping me from just setting up Calm Minds or Bulk Ups on it for 10,000 years? Nothing cares. Nothing hurts it. So, I think there's going to be a lot of problems in the Detroit Drills' future regarding that. But not every team has those options, and I think it'd be very easy to make some trades to get some more offensive, fused in here. I think Hippowdon does absolutely nothing on this team outside of provide rocks. If you can get rid of Hippowdon for a good offensive tier 2, and then maybe find a couple rock users with other trades, I think this team can really go places. There's just a lot of things that aren't needed on this team. Alcremie doesn't do anything. Articuno doesn't do anything. Not really. I think finding more options with those kind of 3 mons would really benefit the team in the long run. At number 11, I have the Canterbury Granbulls. This is a team that is... Normally, I wouldn't say a team would ever want to rely on Zoroark, but this is a team that can absolutely rely on Zoroark because it has 2 to 2.5 mons that can absolutely just take a huge advantage off of that little bit of uncertainty anyone is going to have when a Zoroark's in the team. Charizard, especially now that it has Scale Shot as another option, Charizard Mega X is a huge problem for a team if you're not sure if that Charizard, like if a Charizard X comes out and you aren't sure if it's that or a Zoroark. If you guess wrong, you've probably lost the game. Because if that thing sets up like a Dragon Dance or a Swords Dance, because it's actually Charizard, and you reacted wrong, you are in a... Like, if you go to like a Fairy type or something, because you're like, no, that's... Or, I guess a Fairy wouldn't really be a wall to Zoroark anymore, because it's Sludge Bomb, but... if you... Whatever it is, big problems. Same with Reuniclus. If you think, like, if you're not sure if it's a Reuniclus or a Zoroark, well, Reuniclus, if it gets one turn to hit one setup move, if it can shore up whatever defense it wants, if it's running like a cheese, Calm Mind, or Acid Armor, I think, for it, set one turn. That's all it takes, and all of a sudden Reuniclus is literally unkillable. So, having the mons to take advantage of uncertainty caused by illusion really makes Zoroark shine. And, I think this is actually a fantastic team to utilize Zoroark. As well, this team is full of Pokemon that are just really good role players. There is basically nothing on this team outside of Landorus and to a point, and to an extent, Charizard, Zoroark, kind of Sylveon, but not really. Basically, everything on this team is like locked into a role, and all the roles are represented. Everything does its role fairly well, which is super nice. Like, you know what you're gonna get with this team, but it's very cohesive. So while it's easier to prep for if you ignore the Zoroark there, everything is still good at what it does. You're not forcing things into roles they're not comfortable with, which can be something that some coaches get stuck with and end up having trouble with. Other problem I have with this team is there is technically a lack of raw power here. Like, Landorus hits really hard, but Landorus can't always afford to run offensively. Charizard X hits very hard, but, it really wants a boost to kind of break stuff. Same with Raikou or Virizion. Like, everything can hit kind of hard, but there's nothing like, there's nothing that's just absolutely world-ending, just hit them. There's no Regilucky that just blows things apart with Transistor Thunderbolts. There's no Hoopa with its base 150 special attack, stuff like that. That's one thing that this team is kind of lacking. It really wants to set up with Mons first before really harnessing power. At number 12, we have the Houston RegiRockets. This is the team that has a ton of bulk that is all different. You've got, Melmetal can be fat, Zapdos can be fat, Weezing can be fat, Corsola can be fat, Slowbro can be fat, Goodra can be fat, Double's fat, Quagsire is fat and unaware. Like, there's a lot of really defensive mons here. This is going to cause opponents to really kind of look out the box, like to look for ways out of the box to deal with all of the different ways that this team can stop your offense. It's going to require opponents to put in more prep than what they normally think of, which is certainly good. This team hits really well physically. Just between Melmetal and Weavile, ignoring even Emboar, which can hit really hard physically, just those two alone cause absolute headaches to defend against. Things I'm not necessarily too fond of with this team. I'm not a huge fan of the hazard control. It's got two good options, don't get me wrong. Zapdos is a good defogger. Weezing is a fairly good defogger. Those are it. That's all you got. I'm pretty sure this team will generally have an easy time fitting it on one of those two mons every week, because looking at the team as a whole, I don't think it's going to be I believe at least one, if not both of those, are going to come nearly every week. So hazard control is going to be there, but it's nice to have the ability to kind of spread it out more than just two mons. The other problem I kind of have here is that top end speed. There's two very fast options, don't get me wrong. Weavile is 125, Selgor is 145. They're very fast. But you've got 80 and 88, which 88 is double, which sometimes runs speed, sometimes doesn't. It's like a 50-50. Then 88 to 100, you've got Zapdos, and then 100 to 125. So if you're running defensive Zapdos, you have nothing that runs speed until 125. That is very easy to take advantage of. Once again, this team is going to be just absolutely shredded by things that are modest, adamant, or have way more HP than normal. And this team cannot take advantage of people running extra bulk by just getting rid of it with hazards, because there is one Stealth Rock user on the entire team, and that is Corsola Galar, which is not a good Stealth Rocker. It can do it, but you do not want that thing to be your sole Stealth Rocker on the team. Now, this team does technically have Spikes and Toxic Spikes. Selgor does have Spikes and Toxic Spikes, but it's not really a long-term hazard user. It's not like Ferrothorn or Klefki, where if you lose your hazards, you can bring it back in again and just get them fixed up, because, well, Selgor is fairly suicidal. And of course, there is toxic spikes on Wheezing as well, which this team is going to need to abuse. But then again, you bring back to hazard control. Can Wheezing afford to run toxic spikes and defog? That'll be difficult. And such a defensive team also not have a single Wisher and only have one Heal Bell aromatherapy user, which is once again Wheezing. Wheezing is going to be shouldering a huge burden, and probably way more of a burden than any Tier 3 ever should have to do for a team. I think there are going to be a lot of problems because I think this team is going to get overwhelmed by... this team is dipped so deep into defense that any team with just average balance will be able to just survive it because this team is going to have trouble killing things. Now, fortunately, the things that try to kill on this team are very good at it. Melmetal and Weavile are very good at it. But can you imagine a week where you can't bring one of them, much less two of them? All of a sudden, you're relying everything on one of these two? Because there's not much offense left other than that. Zapdos has a respectable attacks, I guess, a respectable special attack. And it might actually have to be a special attacker like every week. But then once again, well, how do you get rid of hazards? You gonna make Wheezing do everything again? I think this team is trying to condense too much into too few Mons, and there's a lot of do-nothing Mons in here that don't really have a purpose. I don't really know what Corsola is doing here, outside of course, being the sole rocker on the team. I'm not really sure what Goodra's doing here. Goodra's a fantastic glue Mon. It's a good, bulky offensive Mon for teams that want like a middle pivot kind of deal. This team doesn't need that. This team does not want what Goodra's services are offering. Same with Double. I do not really... Okay. Double setting up defense into Calm Mind Slowbro Mega is like the cheesiest of possible cheeses, and if you don't bring like Roar for it, you are absolutely screwed because you can't crit that Slowbro. But outside of that, I don't really know, like, and I guess Doubles can like cheese that into a Calm Mind like Quagsire 2 or something. Actually, Quagsire doesn't get Calm Mind though. Quagsire runs Curse for its offensive, so it has to run Amnesia, so that doesn't really work either. So yeah, Double can just kind of... I don't think it really offers anything to this team outside of cheesing people with Slowbro, which is very, very easy to stop. Everyone is going to be running Taunt and Roar against this team anyway, so I don't think Double is really going to offer any services, unfortunately. So yeah, Houston needs to inject some more offense and some good speed in there, like at that 100 range, 110, something like that, somewhere from something. It's desperate for it. Like, if you could turn... I don't know. There's got to be something there for them, though. I'm sure. At number 13, we have the Russia No Retreat. This team is very good at hitting very hard right off the bat. That is what this team is going to be trying to do. Eruption Heatran hits really hard off the bat. Magma Storm, Lava Plume, doesn't really matter. All those moves hit very hard off the bat. Beedrill, massive attack stat. I think it's like 140 or something. Adaptability, U-turn, crazy damaging. Hoopa, base 150 special attack, and of course there's that 110 attack as well, so it can technically use both, but 150 special attack, oh my god. Toxtricity, of course, has Boom Burst, has Overdrive, plus its ability, plus Throat Spray if it wants, so it hits really hard, really fast. Pangoro, Banded Pangoro is just super difficult to wall. That Fighting Dark Stab with a couple coverage options is actually just... That's basically impossible to wall. It's very, very good. Salamence has, of course, Moxie. Zweilous, I believe, has the strongest like outrage in the game or something like that. So this team hits very, very hard. This team also has a great variety of fast versus slow, and has some great ways to abuse Trick Room as well. Runeriga setting things up for like Hoopa or Zweilous or Pangoro are all fantastic Trick Room abusers. Heck, even Heatran, if you know, like 77 is not that fast, so if you can kind of, you know, same way I think Toxtricity is around that speed. I think it's in the 70s as well. It is 75, it looks like, but it might be 70. I can't remember which one's which. No, it's 75 because Supa's 70. But yeah, so there's very good Trick Room options there, but there's also very good fast options between Dragon Dance, Salamence, and Beedrill as well. So this team is very good at hitting offensively on both sides, which is something a lot of teams don't either do or don't prepare for. The biggest downside is, of course, that 45 speed gap between Salamence and Beedrill. Of course, that's kind of like, it sounds like I'm punishing them because Beedrill's so fast. If Beedrill was like 125, I'd be like, whoa, that's kind of nice. But, you know, having something over 100 is important. 110, 112, 115, somewhere in that range, just to keep people honest. That's what's important. One thing I don't like about this team, I do not believe there is any priority. I could not find anything outside of, I think, Celebi as Sucker Punch. And if you run that and win your match, your opponent should probably just drop from Pokemon. So, like, I know you can hit fast and you can hit hard on a Trick Room as well, but priority is, once again, something that can keep people honest. You don't have to keep... If they know you don't have priority, they can like try to set up with like a Dragon Dance user until they're at 2%. It doesn't matter. You can't revenge. And then, of course, yeah, that speed gap I mentioned. Finding something in that 110 range is always very, very nice, just to keep people from abusing you with things that hit harder than they should. Down at number 14, I have the Mexico City Volcarona. This team, something it does well, it's got access, I believe, to just about everything utility-wise it needs. Yeah, it's got all the hazards except Sticky Web, which there's a couple mons on this team that would like it, but overall, doesn't really need it all that much. It's got the hazard control. It's actually, I think, got the record drafted 5 Heal Bell Aromatherapy users. It's got Cleric stuff with Wish, Togekiss, and whatnot. So, it's got, like, you know, it's got the bits and bobs that really kind of put teams together. Also, this team hits you in a lot of different ways, which is absolutely nice. You know, I mean, Victini's great physically, sometimes great specially, but rarely. Lopunny hits really hard, and it's also got access to U-Turn now, which is disgusting. Togekiss can be a good offensive mon. Sharpedo, Mismagius, Roserade, Landorus, Tyrantrum, like, they all hit, and they all hit in different ways, which is really nice. If you can find what your opponent's weakness is, you can exploit it, which is certainly nice. And with the right prep, this team can pick the mon that does them. Like, if this team knew exactly what, like, the 6 mons that were coming were, it'd be very easy to find 1 or 2 things that could just tear that team apart. Not every team has that ability, because sometimes the offensive options aren't, you know, there aren't like 6 or 7 or 8 different options that could all be offensive, that could all work depending on the matchup. So that is quite nice. Downsides of this team, I really got to give it to the bulk. Registeel is, of course, fat, but your other bulk variety is kind of lacking. Lantern isn't that good. It's like fine, but it's got good typing. It's got immunity to the type of your choice. Like, there's good options there, but it's not like its base stats aren't good. Like, its typing is greater than anything else, and it does get worn down a little too quickly. Rotom Frost is just a terrible, terrible defensive mon. Rotom Frost is basically, like, of the Rotoms that aren't base Rotom, it's the only one that just can't be used defensively successfully very often. All the others at least have the ability to. But this one, I mean, Electric Ice, that ice typing is defensively not the way. Togekiss, of course, can be run bulky, but I just find it doesn't generally do it as well as you'd like. It feels so much better with that thing just hit Thunder Wave and Air Slash. But if you don't have the special attack investment, it just doesn't hit hard enough unless you run Nasty Plot, and then it's like, why are you even running bulk? So, you know, just kind of iffy. And then the rest of the team, there's no bulk. Roserade is, if Roserade is your like 4th best bulky mon, your team is way too frail. And that's just all there really is to it. After that, I mean, you've got a decent speed gap but it's just 105 to 135. Like, it's actually not that bad. It's just that when so much of your team is offensive, only having one mon over 105 is a little weird. Everything is just kind of like a little bit slower than you'd think something as frail as them are. So I think that might end up causing problems too, because they're going to get outsped, but it's not like they're surviving the hits because they're still offensive mons. They're just a little bit slower, which I think will cause problems. At number 15, I have Delhi's Pults, which at first glance, when I just first saw this team without looking into like the moves and the speeds and stuff, this looks like a team I would absolutely try to draft. There are enough problems in it that I could notice if I was drafting that I would try to fix. But overall, there's a lot of mons on this team that I actually really like and have tried to, you know, foist onto others to draft before. But it's got good extremes with offense. It's got Darmanitan Galar, which is another thing we unbanned this season. We unbanned Guerrilla Tactics, and of course bumped Darmanitan up to tier 1. It's got Keldeo is a great offensive, okay, not great. Well, it's got Flip Turn now, so maybe it's up to great again, but it's a very good offensive mon. Chandelure, Fire Ghost stab combo is quite good. Gardevoir next Cavalier can attack well. Gliscor can cheese wins with like Swords Dance, Roost, Earthquake sets pretty easily because Toxic Heal is, of course, a very, very good ability. So like there's lots of nice things here to just kind of pick apart opposing teams. And then they've got a couple nice core defensive mons. Mandibuzz, Venusaur actually have fairly good synergy together, even if they don't have rocks and neither of them resists flying. And of course, neither resists ice, but that can be, you know, made up for in other ways. And actually, now that I look at it, I don't like the ice defensive options on this team. They're all things that don't want to get chipped in the first place. So there is that. But I think overall those two are good. If there could be like a slightly different third option for defense, that's not like Sliggoo or Audino, something that resists ice, ideally maybe a water type, that might be something that's nice. But there's good fallbacks on this team. Like switching something to Mega Venusaur or Mandibuzz often works out well for you. Things I don't like about this team, well, the obvious problem, of course, is that there is one Stealth Rock user, which is Gliscor, and then you have no other hazards. How do you draft 11 Pokemon and have one thing that can use hazards? Actually, I should check. Can Audino? I'm like 99% sure that Audino cannot use Stealth Rocks, but I am not familiar with it as I want to be. Audino is actually something that I have been looking to draft for a while, but it's not like I can ever not draft Chansey. Yeah, I can't win Stealth Rocks. So yeah, one Stealth Rocker. That's a problem. How do you draft 11 Pokemon and have one Stealth Rock user while also having 0 Spikers, 0 Toxic Spikers, no Webs? And then there are 2 hazard controllers on this team. You got Defog from, once again, Gliscor, and then Mandibuzz, which of course often runs... I mean, Mandibuzz is like the defogger, and it's on a team like this probably going to come to basically every match, so it's not like that's a huge problem, but variety is the spice of life, and having more options is never bad. This team is good otherwise clerically. It's got a couple Heal Bell users. It's got Wish Gardevoir, which is not good, but it's also got Wish Audino, which is actually quite nice. This team, however, has no priority, which is a problem, as I noted before, with that one other team that had, once again, no priority. Always have something. And I'm not counting, like, Aqua Jet Keldeo or Shadow Sneak Gardevoir. Those are just not options. So having something that can, like, stop setup on this team is going to be difficult. You've got, like, Taunt on a couple things, but phasing on this team isn't really a thing. You can't Revenge. If, like, something gets, like, +2 speed, like 2 Dragon Dances or 2 Quiver Dances, you are probably just going to lose right there. And that's what a lot of teams are going to be trying to do against this guys, is just getting to like +2/+2 or something, and then the game's over. Because nothing on this team is truly a wall either. There's just lots of good, bulky stuff, but nothing that just says no stop. So I think Dilly Pults are going to have a lot of problem with that kind of setup stuff as the season goes on. And last, we have at number 16, the GWS Galladiators. I'm not going to lie, I actually have a lot of trouble with this team. I'm not sure what it's trying to do. On the plus side, this team can absolutely snowball out of control under the right circumstances against the right coaches. Jirachi, if you manage to snipe the if a team brings one or two things for Jirachi, if you can snipe them, it's unstoppable. Comfey often maybe has one, maybe two mons on the other team that can stop it. Curon behind a sub is just disgusting. Blacephalon, of course, is the snowballer of choice. Give it a scarf or whatever, and it can just rack up special attack boosts. So there's the options to have a snowball here. But there's a lot of problems with this team. There are 10 out of 11 of this team is within 25 speed of each other. 90 through 115 consists of 10. The only thing that's outside of that 90 to 115 range is whatever's 70 speed, which is, I think, Samurott. And Samurott is what it is. I've never seen it drafted before for probably good reason. I refuse to believe that there's not a better bulky water in Tier 5. I don't know what it's doing on this team in the first place. But the problem is everything else of those 10 other mons, 90, 95, 95, 100, 100, 100, 106, 107, 110, 115. Oh no. Oh no. Problem. I didn't think this was ever I didn't think it was possible for his team to have this clustered of a speed stat. But that's fine, because everything else on this team is good as well, though, right? Unfortunately, it's not really the case. Only team that has less hazards than this is the team before, number 15, Dilly's Pults. This team has 2 Stealth Rock users, Jirachi and Lycanroc. Neither of them really want to spend a move slot on Stealth Rock. You'd have to be running like defensive or like a weird Scarf Rachi to run Stealth Rock on it, or Lycanroc just hates losing a coverage move for Stealth Rock because then it can't run Sword Stance or can't run all the different attacks it needs. But one of them is going to have to basically every week. And there's no other hazards that I could find on this team. There's no spikes, there's no toxic spikes, there's no sticky web, which this team would actually love sticky web. It would kill for sticky web if it could get it. Everything in that like 95 to 100 range, 110, they would love for mons to be a little bit slower than they are. Hazard control on this team isn't terrible. There's only 3 users. Comfey hates clicking defog, and Golbat is going to be his defogger if he brings it basically all the time. The other third, of course, I'm counting Magic Bounce for Mega Absol, but Magic Bounce is a risky thing on mons that aren't bulky, which Mega Absol is not bulky. So that can end up being a huge problem as well. Hazards can absolutely destroy this team. Not having a grounded poison means toxic spikes will just eat this team apart. A single spike on this team, there's only one mon that floats, which is Golbat. So that's another thing, chipping off 12% at a time. There's going to be a lot of problems that come with this team in that regard. Also, there's no ground type on this team, which I think not drafting a ground type or an electric immunity well, I guess one electric immunity. You got Motor Drive on Electivire. But you cannot bring Electivire to every match expecting it to be able to eat all the Volt switches that this team is going to be facing. So there's a small problem with that as well. I think this team is probably going to get played around with a lot, and I don't really know how to fix it, to be honest. I really think that when I look at this team, I see 2 picks that were probably made, 3 picks probably, that were made roughly when they should have been made. I don't think outside of Jirachi, Blacephalon, and Golbat, anything on this team was in any danger of getting drafted at any point when it was taken. Everything could have easily been shifted down by 2 or 3 rounds, and there could be much higher quality Mons in those places. Like, I mean, Lycanroc in round 4, Comfin 5, so on and so forth. And you could just get much better stuff in higher rounds. I don't think this is a team that you would want to draft a lot without snipes, because there's just so many problems. So I have to imagine he was sniped a lot or something, because there look like there's a lot of panic picks as you lose things or something to get where you are, I think, with this team. Now, the good thing is, I think this team is absolutely salvageable. I don't think there is a single unsalvageable team in Magikarp League. I think it'll take all 3 trades. I think getting rid of like Electivire, Samurott, and Shaman is probably what you have to do. I think there's got to be better options for all 3 of those. Get a different 3, 4, and 5 and find some room somewhere. Because I think as is, this team is going to have trouble in a lot of matches. And so with all 16 teams done, here's a look at our rankings one more time. Once again, I think that these, similar to Gyarados League, there were a lot of really strong teams drafted. I think there was a little bit more of a disparity in Magikarp than there was in Gyarados between like the top and the bottom. But there's still, I think there's a clear like half, like there's a good top and there's a half that's going to have to make some trades to get back, or have some absolutely just bonkers coach play to get back into the race. But nothing here is unsalvageable. There's no team, like, there isn't a team, if like any coach dropped or something, no team here would scare me away from taking it with like 3 free picks. And you guys have 3 free trades. Well, of course, that's all you get, but I think that could fix any team here. And I'm sure that those of you at the bottom probably disagree with me anyway, and will let me know. But yep, I think that all went pretty well. A lot of good teams here, and no team that is unsalvageable, as I have said a few times now, because it's about dinner time and my mind is starting to wander, not gonna lie. But yeah, I'm looking forward to a good season out of you guys. Several new coaches here, quite a few returners, and I know a few battles have already happened, which is good to see. I love the enthusiasm. Magikarp League almost always starts off stronger than Gyarados, because it seems like the Gyarados coaches are quite lax when it comes to getting battles, you know, done outside of the weekend. But I love to see the enthusiasm when battles are happening on Tuesday or Wednesday or something. It's great to see. So you guys keep up that enthusiasm all season long. Make those battles, get those trades done, bulk up your teams, and well, we'll see which of you end up in the playoffs and which ones don't. Like I said in the Gyarados Power Rankings, I'll be doing my next ranking with updates with new records and trades and stuff like that after your Week 3 matches have been concluded, once you get out of your first round of divisional play. And we'll see how the rankings shake up. I expect, just like in Gyarados, there will be quite a bit of shifting. There always is in the beginning of the season, because I'll start taking into account how the coaches play as well. There are plenty of times where coaches draft under their playing ability or draft over their playing ability, and that can shake out as well. So I'm looking forward to a great season from you guys as well, and I can't wait to see what you all have in store for me. So I will see you in about 3 weeks.